Indonesia has a vibrant and diverse history that spans thousands of years, influenced by various cultures, religions, and empires. The country is made up of over 17,000 islands, with a population that represents hundreds of different ethnicities, languages, and traditions. This unique blend of cultural diversity has shaped Indonesia's past, leading to the formation of one of Southeast Asia's most dynamic nations. Let's take a journey through the major periods in Indonesian history, starting from the early civilizations to the modern era, exploring how Indonesia evolved into the country we know today. Long before recorded history, Indonesia was home to early human ancestors. Fossils of Homo erectus, known as the Java man, were discovered on the island of Java, proving that humans have lived in Indonesia for more than 1 million years. These early humans were part of a group of Austronesian-speaking peoples who gradually spread across Southeast Asia and into the Pacific. They developed early tools, fishing techniques, and simple agricultural practices. By the 1st century CE, Indonesia was influenced by Indian traders and settlers. This brought the introduction of Hinduism and Buddhism to the archipelago. Indian cultural influences spread across Indonesia, leading to the rise of powerful empires and kingdoms that played a significant role in shaping the region's history. The Srivijaya Empire, based on the island of Sumatra, was one of the most important maritime powers during the 7th to 13th centuries. The Srivijaya Empire controlled much of Southeast Asia and became an important center for trade, culture, and religion. Buddhism flourished under the rule of Srivijaya, and the empire was known for its advanced architecture, art, and scholarship. Following the decline of Srivijaya, the Majapahit Empire rose to prominence during the 13th to 16th centuries. This empire, centered in Java, is often considered one of the greatest empires in Southeast Asia. The Majapahit Empire controlled large parts of the Indonesian archipelago and even extended its influence to parts of modern-day Malaysia and the Philippines. Majapahit rulers embraced Hinduism, but the empire also welcomed diverse cultures and religions, creating a cosmopolitan society. Majapahit's cultural contributions, including its architecture and literature, continue to inspire Indonesia today. As the Majapahit Empire declined, the spread of Islam across the region began to reshape Indonesia. Islam arrived in Indonesia through trade, particularly by Muslim merchants from the Middle East, India, and China. By the 15th century, several sultanates had emerged, such as the Sultanate of Malacca and the Sultanate of Demak. These sultanates played an essential role in the spread of Islam throughout Indonesia. The peaceful conversion to Islam contrasted with the earlier influences of Hinduism and Buddhism, and it left a lasting impact on the culture and society of the region. With the arrival of Europeans in the 16th century, Indonesia's history entered a new phase. The Portuguese were the first Europeans to explore the archipelago, seeking control over the lucrative spice trade. They established trading posts on the islands of Maluku, also known as the Spice Islands. However, their presence was short-lived as the Dutch, who had also come to control the spice trade, soon replaced them. The Dutch established the Dutch East India Company, VOC, in 1602, and over the next few centuries, they slowly expanded their control over much of Indonesia. The Dutch colonization of Indonesia was marked by exploitation and resistance. The Dutch East India Company, VOC, controlled the islands with an iron fist, forcing local populations into labor to harvest spices, rubber, and other valuable resources. The Dutch established a plantation economy, and the people of Indonesia were subjected to harsh working conditions and significant economic hardship. Over time, the VOC went bankrupt, and the Dutch government took direct control of the colony in the 19th century. This period of Dutch rule, known as the Dutch East Indies, was characterized by heavy exploitation, with the Dutch using Indonesia as a source of raw materials for their empire. Despite centuries of Dutch colonization, resistance movements began to emerge across the islands. One of the most notable was the Aceh Sultanate in northern Sumatra, which fiercely resisted Dutch efforts to control the region. The struggle between the Dutch and the Acehnese lasted for decades and was one of the bloodiest conflicts in Indonesia's colonial history. Other forms of resistance took place, including the Padri War in West Sumatra and the Bali Wars, as the Indonesian people fought to maintain their independence. By the early 20th century, nationalist movements began to gain momentum across the archipelago. Indonesians, inspired by the ideas of freedom and independence circulating around the world, began to demand their right to self-determination. One of the key figures in this movement was Sukarno, who would later become Indonesia's first president. The early nationalist movement was largely led by intellectuals and activists who had been educated in the Dutch system and were inspired by the political changes happening in Europe. World War II played a crucial role in shaping Indonesia's future. In 1942, the Japanese invaded Indonesia, displacing the Dutch and establishing their own occupation. Although Japan's rule was brutal, it provided Indonesians with the opportunity to resist colonial powers and demand independence. During this period, Sukarno and other nationalist leaders were able to mobilize the population for independence. When Japan surrendered to the Allies in 1945, the power vacuum left by the Japanese occupation allowed Sukarno and his colleague Muhammad Hatta to declare Indonesia's independence on August 17, 1945. However, the Dutch were unwilling to give up the colony without a fight. This led to the Indonesian National Revolution, a bloody struggle for independence that lasted until 1949. Despite fierce opposition from the Dutch, Indonesia's independence was eventually recognized after a series of negotiations, and the country officially became independent on December 27, 1949. Sukarno became the first president of Indonesia, and his leadership marked the beginning of a new era for the nation. He pursued a policy of non-alignment and sought to keep Indonesia independent from both Western and Eastern blocs during the Cold War. Sukarno implemented a political system known as guided democracy, which granted him near total control over the government. While Sukarno was popular among many Indonesians, his rule was also marked by growing political instability, economic struggles, and military tensions. By the mid-1960s, the political situation in Indonesia had reached a breaking point. In 1965, an attempted coup by communist forces resulted in widespread violence and the eventual suppression of communist groups by the military. The aftermath of the coup and the anti-communist purge left a deep scar on Indonesia's political landscape. In 1967, General Suharto, who had played a crucial role in suppressing the coup, assumed control of the government and became Indonesia's second president. Suharto's reign, known as the New Order, was characterized by authoritarian rule, but it also brought economic stability and rapid development to Indonesia. Suharto implemented policies that encouraged foreign investment and industrialization, and the economy grew at a fast pace during the 1970s and 1980s. However, this economic growth came at a high cost. Suharto's government was known for its corruption, human rights abuses, and repression of political dissent. The 1990s saw growing unrest as the economy began to suffer due to the Asian financial crisis. Public protests and demands for reform led to Suharto's resignation in 1998 after 31 years in power. Indonesia entered a period of democratic reform known as the Reformation era. The country adopted a new constitution, held free and fair elections, and began decentralizing power to local governments. Sukarno's daughter, Megawati Soekarnoputri, became the first female president of Indonesia in 2001, and Indonesia continued to develop as a democratic nation. Since the fall of Suharto, Indonesia has faced a number of challenges, including political corruption, religious tensions, and environmental degradation. However, the country has made significant strides in economic development, infrastructure, and education. Indonesia is now the world's third-largest democracy, with a growing middle class, a strong economy, and a central role in Southeast Asia. The nation has also become a prominent member of international organizations such as the United Nations and the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN. Today, Indonesia is known for its rich cultural heritage, stunning natural landscapes, and vibrant cities. It continues to face challenges but is a proud and resilient nation, with a history that reflects its journey from ancient kingdoms to modern democracy. As a nation of great diversity and immense potential, Indonesia's future looks bright, and its history continues to inspire people around the world.